Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. You've uncovered your ancestral lineage and discovered events that have carried into your generation and may be the key to healing yourself in the present. What practices may you employ to connect with your ancestors to heal yourself and troubled family relationships? My guest this week on Vox Novus, Shelley Kaehr, has worked with thousands of people around the world, helping them achieve greater peace and happiness in their lives. A renowned past life regressionist and one of the world's leading authorities on energy healing and mind-body medicine, Shelley's award-winning books have been translated into multiple languages around the world. She created the groundbreaking genealogical regression based on her award-winning international bestseller, Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life. Her website is pastlifelady.com, and she joins me this week to discuss her work and new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. Please join me in welcoming back to Vox Novus, Shelley Kaehr. Welcome, Shelley.
Victor, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Shelley, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, please share your early path and how it led to your interest in healing, metaphysics, and past lives.
Yes, I was definitely influenced at a very early age from my parents. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and lived in Arizona for a period of time, and my dad was managing some of the big turquoise mines there, so we were always out exploring the gem and mineral kingdom, which I ended up writing a lot about the healing properties of stones and gems in my early career. And then we moved to Colorado Springs, and that's really where I was first introduced to the idea of past lives. Back in the 70s, there was a really famous book called The Search for Bridey Murphy, which was about a woman who suffered from terrible allergies. And she went to a hypnotherapist, and she was having pretty good results, but not great results, doing some regression therapy to get to the source of allergies. And when it wasn't going far enough, I guess the hypnotherapist one day just said, "Hey, I'd like you to go back to the actual source event of where these allergies began." And the woman began reporting her past life in Ireland, and she named all the people in the village, and she had this accent. So this ended up becoming a very famous book called The Search for Bridey Murphy that I'm sure many of your listeners have heard about. So my mother actually attended a luncheon and met the hypnotherapist and the subject of the book. And she bought the book and brought it home to the family dinner table when I was a little kid. So we were sitting around talking about this idea that, that we go on from here, that it's not all over after this one lifetime. And there was something about this concept that really struck a chord with me at a soul level and stuck with me for many, many years until years later. A friend of mine was killed in a hiking accident, and I was encouraged at that time to go have a past life regression to see if we knew each other before. And it was so very, very transformational for me that I realized that that's what I wanted to do for others. And I started working in this area, in the early 2000s. So it's been quite a while. It's been quite a journey so far.
And in the early 2000s, you had a life-changing near-death experience. What happened, and how did it change your life?
Yes. During this time, what led me into the career that I am currently in, I started hearing the inner voice very loudly, not the way you and I are speaking now, but just an inner voice guiding me. I started reading all kinds of spiritual books, studying different spiritual matters. And then one day I heard something. The inner voice told me there was something wrong with my heart. I was not going to live much longer. And one night, through no accidents or anything, but I just lifted up out of my body and I found myself in an otherworldly light where I was surrounded by loving beings. The only one that I remember in that loving light, actually, other than faceless loving beings, was my grandmother who passed away before I was born. I do remember seeing her there. And it was all very nonverbal, cerebral. And I was guided that I needed to come back. And of course, I came back. And when I came back from whatever this strange incident was, a friend of mine ended up helping me get over to the hospital. They hooked me up to some machines. They could see that my pulse was very low. And then they held me for observation overnight. And then they just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So they just put it down as a virus and just sent me home. But after I came back from that experience, I started having an understanding of things that I had never been shown or taught. Um, there was a there was a kind of knowing about how to run energy through the body and a very deep understanding about the idea that we read about in metaphysical books, but this idea that thoughts are things and they're occupying physical space. And I was shown how to like move these stuck pieces of energy off of the fields around the body. And so as I started developing my hypnotherapy practice, one of the things that was different about what I was doing back in the earliest of times was that it's one thing if we talk about your past lives, we can go back and you can intellectualize that. That's very healing. But there's also an energetic component to those memories. So if someone goes back, for example, into some life that they lived, like let's say in the Middle Ages, that there's not only some verbal healing that can take place, but there's actually energy that can be the frequency of which can be raised, enlightened, transmuted, and maybe even moved completely out of the field. And then the person could have a really, really profound healing. And so that early experience then really informed some of the things that even, now it's 24 years later, I have not changed my perception of those things. I continue to understand that what I was shown in that early time is, in my mind, is how things are. And in that regard, I really haven't changed my thinking on that at all over the years. I'm more convinced than ever that we do have the ability to transform the way we're viewing reality and really improve our lives for the better.
You are a prolific author, and the last time you were with us, you shared your award-winning bestseller, Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life. What inspired that book, and what did you share with readers?
Yes, yes. Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life came out in 2021. I've been writing some books for my fabulous publisher, Llewellyn, who I love and adore. That book, Heal Your Ancestors, came about because back again in the early 2000s, my interest, as I mentioned, because of childhood interests, was always in past life regression. When I began working with other people, sometimes intuitively, I was sensing, you know what, before we can go into past lives, we need to do some healing in the present life with some people. And a lot of the healing that all of us, including myself, I think, and probably none of your listeners, probably not you or any of your listeners, but let's just say some of us have challenges with family members and things like that. So,
No, that's not true.
yes, that could never be true. Of course not. So what I was finding is some people had some healing that was going to need to take place with their family. So I would have them go into a space where they could have a visionary encounter with the higher selves of their parents, mother and father. And by higher self, I'm talking about not the human being who is flawed and maybe did horrible things or who someone is angry at, but actually addressing the parents at the soul level and attempting to get some conversation going that can be healing. And so during this time, I was guided that we needed to have the person say, "Hey, mom and dad, does anybody's family need a healing today? Like on mom's side of the family or dad's side of the family? And so let's say the mother would say, sure, my side of the family needs a healing. Okay, great. So now we can actually travel. And instead of going into past lives where our own soul was somebody else, we're going to travel out over time and float over events that happened to the ancestors, many of which might have been like battles or funerals or someone's sick and something tragic is happening. So they would float out to these events. And let's say we're hovering over a battle, and I'd have them say, okay, now just look down at this and do you sense any of your ancestors are there? And they'll go, oh my gosh, look, there's 5 times great grandfathers standing there. Okay, great. Let's send him and all people involved in this situation a healing. And so we would send energy to that space. And then since they were traveling into this space with this higher self of their parent, we could send light to the parent, and then we could notice their parent becoming lighter and brighter, and then that lightness could then be experienced and observed and felt by the individual as they feel themselves becoming lighter. And then we would bring all of that healing forward through time, send it to the family, and then send it out to future generations. And so this was something that I called a genealogical regression. And so I had been writing some books for Llewellyn, and they had approached me and said, hey, we want you to write some more books. And I thought to myself, maybe I'll bring that little old thing out of the drawer. I've never really talked about that very much. And so I wrote the book, and this was just about the time that I think we're having an awakening here in the Western world, where we're starting to realize and acknowledge that there is a great need to do ancestral healing and honoring those who have walked the path before us. And so it just kind of then took on a life of its own, and the journey continues. So that's where we're at.
For those who are not familiar with past life regression sessions, what are they like?
It's like, it can be kind of like listening to a guided meditation CD in some sense. You close your eyes, you bring light through the body, and then there's an imaginary door. You just walk through the door, and then my practices are in all of my books where readers can actually try them. But in this, once you walk through the first door, there's always a helpful figure who will meet you there, whether that's an angel, a being of light, a guide. It could be an ancestor, just some loving presence who can help guide you through the space. And then you're just guided to go out into the past, into different events that are relating to whatever the issue is that you're trying to work on. So just like the lady with the allergies, people usually are concerned with the arenas of, in my opinion, to really simplify it, love, health, or money. Or let's not even call it money, but let's say the umbrella of security, having security on the planet, having love or health issues. So let's say a lot of relationship issues. They want to go back to the origin point where they first knew someone. And so they're going to be going in the theater of the mind to travel back to that origin point where they can go observe themselves in a different scene. And then people are asked questions like, okay, so what's going on in that situation, in the 1300s? And they'll say, well, we're doing this, that, and the other. Okay, great. So how is that applying to what we're doing now? And, that everything doesn't have to be a tragedy. I mean, sometimes it's wonderful things. If it's great things that are happening, great. Then we want to notice them so that we could do more of them in the current experience. But if it's something like a pattern that's unproductive or not working anymore, then again, just by identifying it, there's exercise there to say, okay, what are we learning from this experience, and how can we move forward then in a more empowering way where we can change the things that are not working and then embrace the things that are.
How does your genealogical regression differ from a traditional past life regression?
It's instead of looking out one's own eyes, which one normally is during a past life regression, in these senses, we are normally hovering over events and sending light to others, and then just observing the sensations in the body. It's very interesting. in terms of how people respond to a genealogical regression more than a past life. It sometimes can be a lot more emotional as a general rule. I think it's because again, I believe in reincarnation. I do believe in past lives, and some listeners may, and some may not, but still, it's not like I can go prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that a certain person was a certain person in a previous life. But with the ancestors, you can really go out onto ancestry.com or one of these websites, and you could really research these people. These people are real. They're living in your DNA. And I think that makes it a bit more emotional. So, and just knowing that you're seeing again, through a spiritual lens, obviously, but you're still sensing, the things that these ancestors had to go through so you could even be here. I think it just becomes very, very emotional. So I think that's one of the big differences for sure.
Someone is undergoing challenges right now. How do they differentiate those from current life triggers versus ancestral triggers?
Wow, that's so interesting. I think that, a lot of people begin the journey if something's going wrong, which normally we won't seek healing unless things are going wrong. I mean, it'd be nice to be proactive, but most of us, until something's going in a way that we don't want, now we're going to have to start turning and looking at different avenues. And I think a lot of people will start looking, well, maybe it's just something that's happening in my life, or maybe I just need to go to the doctor and I'm going to be okay. And then once they've tried those possibilities and they start saying, wait a minute, this isn't working. This isn't quite getting to the root of what I feel it needs to, then they start looking into other avenues. Earlier in my career, I really believed that different aches and pains or different what I would call unwanted influences or emotional things that are coming up, I really would have told you even definitely 10 years ago, but even maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said, well, that's past life stuff. So we just need to go, make peace with our past lives and everything will be fine. However, I have since had my own brush with ancestral healing where I was really shown that a lot of the things that we are actually experiencing, because they are actually in our DNA, and we're starting to do more studying about that. I'm not sure that I guess I would say now that it's possible that more of it is actually ancestral, even than through past lives or even current life things. I think a lot of there's been actual studies done about, what we like, what we dislike, some of our little quirky behaviors that, makes you and makes me and your listeners, every person who's listening to this right now, you all have something that you think, oh, I do that. And this is how people know that it's me. But I've just observed now especially since Heal Your Ancestors came out and working with so many people on this, that some of those little things that we thought are us, when we dig a little deeper, we're finding out, wait a minute, that's something my ancestor used to do, or this is something that's related to something I just read on my, ancestry.com report, and so I'm starting to think that our ancestral connection is deeper than what I ever would have dreamed possible.
And how does the science of epigenetics and DNA come into play?
Well, they're starting to do real studies. And by real, again, I've been studying these things for years. But again, I'm not the National Institutes of Health or, some of these other reputable organizations that are now actually studying epigenetics. They're studying the effects of trauma and how trauma that's been experienced by the ancestors can actually create stress markers in the offspring. So there's several interesting studies. One of them was about something called the Dutch hunger winter, which happened around World War II, where they did a study of people who were in utero when their parents experienced this great famine and, were have very food insecure and an incredibly stressful time. And so they studied these people, for example, and they could prove that they had higher cortisol levels in their DNA, and then they had a higher incidence of certain diseases compared to a general population who was not experiencing stress in utero. And that's just like one of so many studies that are being done now that are actually showing us that the things that your forebears have gone through can actually affect you. And so then in the realm of the idea of ancestral healing, if you've, I'm sure listeners have been exposed to the fabulous work of Dr. Bruce Lipton and the biology of belief. We don't need to sit here and be worried about that and say, well, I'm just, this is what it is. I'm going to have to live with it. No, we have the consciousness to change those things by consciously sending light to those areas and by, through the power of prayer and belief and healing to transmute those things. And so that's where the realm of ancestral healing meets some actual scientific evidence.
Congratulations on your just published new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. What inspired that, and where does this pick up where Heal Your Ancestors to Heal Your Life left off?
Yes, thank you. I needed to write this one. It really kind of just popped out. I wrote a book called The Goddess Discovered, which was a World Goddess Encyclopedia that came out December of last year. And that book took several years to write. And when I was done with it, I was exploring deity and how connecting with different deities can also connect us to ancestors who perhaps engaged with these deities in the past, and or it can also connect us to our past lives. So this book was several years long. I said, okay, I am finished. I'm going to take a break. But of course, that didn't happen. I don't know when it was 2021 or 2022. I had a very strange experience, and it was during the period when I was writing The Goddess Discovered. I came down with a very bad illness where I had a fever. The fever wouldn't go away. I finally went to the doctor, and the doctor was standing. It was just so stereotypical. She's standing out in the hall just looking at me. She just literally got her hand on her chin going, And she comes back in and goes, Shelley, I feel like you've got pneumonia, but I don't understand why you've got pneumonia because your oxygen level is in the 90s, but I'm going to give you some medicine. I'm going to send you home. So she sends me home. While I'm in my recovery, I'm kind of writhing in pain. And during this strange, bedridden experience, I was starting to experience excruciating pain in different parts of my body. And I was, again, too sick to get out of the bed, really. But I started to be shown that, oh my gosh, this pain that's over here is relating to my mother and her side of the family. And then other pains were associated to my father and their side of the family. I won't disclose too many, but some of these little weird aches and pains that I was having, I started to recall things that I had been told that the ancestors, the closer ancestors, the ones that we actually know about, had gone through. And I was just really shown a lot of different things, how I could send light into those areas rather than wanting to run from them. I could send light into them. I could sense that they were expanding, and I worked a lot of things out. I felt cells kind of clicking back together in different ways. It was as profound, if not more profound, than the experience I had in 2000. Only I just have a different, I have a different perspective at this age, obviously, but it was just the weirdest thing in the world. And I was so overwhelmed by what I had been shown, so many things and I didn't have time to really even write them down or do anything with them because I'm trying to get my goddess book done. So I got that done. And again, I was planning on taking a break, but then it just flowed out. I said, oh, okay. Because I have to be able to tell people how they can send light consciously to these areas, but they don't necessarily need to go, become bedridden to do it, So at the time, I had no idea if I would find the words to do that, but I really feel like this is a book that wanted to come out. I feel like I'm sharing tons of exercises, as I do in all my books, to hopefully gently invite readers into just opening energy lovingly, gently, and consciously, with many, many different kinds of exercises, always with guidance that some you may say, no, I don't feel I can do that right now. And some are very easy to do, again, just by sending love and light to different places in the body. And so that's kind of how it came about.
My guest is Shelley Kaehr. Her brand new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. Shelley, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you and your wonderful work.
Thank you so much, Victor. It's been a joy to be here. My website is pastlifelady.com, and listeners can check me out on Facebook at Past Life Lady.
And your books are available wherever great books are sold.
Yes, they are. And I've got a book link on my website.
And we'll be back with more of Shelley after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Shelley Kaehr. We're talking about her brand new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. Shelley, in Ancestral Energy Healing, you offer readers several exercises and techniques. You start with something that many people may already have in their homes, an ancestral altar. What should be included in that altar?
Yes, I do share some ideas on that. I think that the biggest advice I could give is to put whatever it is comforts you, whatever you enjoy. That might be photographs. There may be heirlooms that were passed down. There could be jewelry. It could be painted a certain color. You might like certain fabrics that remind you of the ancestors. Just whatever brings comfort. And then I think it's important just to have a space set up there where you are able to go to pay that homage. And again, it doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but just a space that you've dedicated to that purpose.
In many cultures, people have ancestral altars in their homes, including photographs of their ancestors and objects, mementos that those ancestors left for them. What's the energy in that?
I think that it's just honoring. I think there's a big energy around the idea that these people, we didn't know them, yet we are connected through DNA, and we would not be here had it not been for them. So I think keeping those photographs and those items nearby is just a different way to express gratitude. I think in the Western world, we take all kinds of different spiritual teachings, and we're all grateful people. But I think this is just taking gratitude to the next level when you really think about, wait a minute, how hard would it have been to have lived in these very early times and to forge the path that they laid out for us so that we could even have a life at all. And I think that just putting a little energy into that space through these photographs, keeping them there, keeps their memory alive, keeps that gratitude, enlivened at a different level than it would be if it's just, a couple pictures in a photo album that you've got over on the shelf that nobody ever looks at.
Many of us have spirit guides, but what is an ancestral guide and how may we connect with them?
Yes, I definitely have enjoyed working with different kinds of guides over the years, particularly, as I had mentioned earlier, when people go into past life spaces, there's always an angel or a guide of some kind who can meet them and help them. Different guides can be available to people for different purposes. And so I think sometimes we're worried about maybe meeting with our being of light or a guardian angel or somebody, but we don't really often take the time to realize that the ancestors are near and around us all the time. And so we can go into those same sacred spaces, and there's exercises in the book to do that, where we can actually invite, instead of the being of light or whoever we were going to meet, we can invite an ancestor to come through. Some people would find it may be an ancestor that they know about because maybe it was a great grandmother or grandfather or someone like that. Or it could be somebody they read about on ancestry.com, or it could just be someone they're going to invite in who is an ancestor maybe they've never encountered before. And through that, there's the possibility to have conversations, to get advice, to receive gifts and talents, which we've all received from our ancestors, and just more fully open to those gifts and talents and what they might mean. They can give us, life lessons, advice, protection, etc.
And tell us where the treasure is buried.
I wish, yes. The winning lottery numbers are there, apparently, if we have good karma. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
And I'm just kidding also. As an interfaith minister, I've officiated many funerals, and one of the things I often hear while comforting the bereaved is that they wish they had either asked for forgiveness, offered forgiveness, or expressed gratitude to their departed family member. Is there a way this may be accomplished?
Wow, that is so interesting. One of the sections in the new book is all about forgiveness. And my friends at Llewellyn, we were putting this material together. In some, I've done a lot of books on energy healing, and usually there's a technique, and the technique is, 1, 2, 3. These are the steps that you must follow. In this book, I'm really inviting people, and I'm reminding them throughout that if you run across a chapter and you're saying, no, I'm not ready for that, you can leave it and you can move on. You can still do these practices. But one of the big practices that I would encourage people to at least consider, even though many are not quite ready for it, and I understand that, would be forgiveness. Because it is such a critical door opener to some of the gifts of the spirit that we can receive when we can come to a state of forgiveness. I mentioned earlier in the show that how this whole thing got started many years ago was that I found that so many people were having so many difficulties, particularly with parents, that they had to have a forgiving, healing journey before we could really go into the past. We've had a lot of, I believe, past lives with family members. People even experience the fact that they may have been in their own family in a past life. But those doorways that we can open to learn more about those things can be more profound if we can somehow open the door to forgiving things that have happened in the here and now. And sometimes things are unforgivable. Absolutely. Horrible things have happened to people. I mean, we know that. But it's kind of like floating over the battlefield that I was talking about earlier. When we send light to a battle that happened to our ancestor, it's not going to feel great. It's never going to be like, wow, I feel great today. No. But can we make it a little bit less traumatizing than it was when we first arrived there? Can we lighten up the energy just a little bit? So even in forgiveness as well, if things are just really just very, very difficult, we're not asking to run a mile. We're just saying, can we just peel a couple layers off of the pain and just kind of neutralize an energy that perhaps was very difficult? And I think that the more that people are open to doing that, there would be so many rewards. And it's just so interesting to hear you say that about, what are people thinking about at the end of their life? I just hope that at whatever level people are ready to meet and engage with some of the things I'm talking about in the book, I hope that it's helpful to them. I just like to think at the end of this particular life, of course, I believe we've been here before and we're coming back again, but that, one of the big teachings of the Buddhists is that we should be mindful of every moment that we're living, that we're really preparing to let go of things that were creating a lot of trauma for us so that we can go into that next space, that spiritual dimension, feeling more peaceful by letting go of some of the things that are troubling us in the now. And I think forgiveness is the door to that. It's so powerful.
And this should also include self-forgiveness for any omission that they had offered their departed loved one.
Wow, yes. I definitely agree with that. We're so hard on ourselves. There are exercises in this book as well to help individuals go into self-forgiveness. I think that's, for many people, maybe the hardest thing to do. We want to extend grace to everyone else, but we've got to turn and extend the grace to ourselves as well. I really believe that most people are good people and they're doing the best they can with the circumstances that they're being presented. And that includes ourselves, and that can be a super tough one for people as well. But you're so right. It's so important.
And one of the messages that I share with many, many people is tomorrow is never guaranteed. If you love someone, tell them today. If someone has hurt you in some way, try and forgive them today. If you feel that you've hurt someone else, ask for forgiveness today and always extend gratitude. That's so, so important.
I completely and 100% agree. We don't know what's coming around the corner. And you're right. Today is the day. This is it. I especially when I was younger, I think I used to spend a lot of time thinking about what's coming next and then we've all, taken trips down memory lane, but in reality, the only moment we have is this moment. And like you said, this is the day today. So you don't know what's coming around the corner. Just be grateful for everything that we have. We have so many blessings, so many things to feel thankful for. And just, love everybody in this moment as best we can.
What is soul retrieval and how may this be accomplished?
Yeah, this is a super powerful exercise where we can, in the case of what we're describing, it could be any person, but let's say it's a parent or some other loved one. You can meet with them in a sacred space and you're just saying, hey, do you have anything that belongs to me? And if they do, they can present it to you by putting it out on their hands. And again, this is in the spiritual arena. They might give you an object. They might give you an emotional thing like gratitude or courage or thankfulness or just love. They might send you love or they might send you an object and you can pick that up and put it inside yourself. And then there's a space there for identifying like, well, let's say it was a box. Okay, well, what does that represent? And people say, well, that just represents love or, whatever it represents, right? And they can receive those things and then giving back things that belong to other people. Maybe we're carrying the burdens of another person on a spiritual level. And when we reach inside ourselves and we're able to give those things back, going, you know what, it's okay for me to give that back or to let that go right now so that I can free up more of my life force for the purpose that I have now. And then there's a kind of a beautiful, I wrote a book on Huna. That was my first book where there's like a ho'oponopono exercise where we're recognizing there's a light in between people. We can cut the cords and send a loving light, cut the cords of discord, let's say, and just send love and peace, total forgiveness. We're releasing the past. We're just living in the now. We're sending love and that gratitude and forgiveness that you mentioned a minute ago and just moving forward. So it can be very, very profound to do a soul retrieval.
So we discover a past life with one of our family members. How may we heal what had transpired in that lifetime?
Let's say, you go into the inner theater and one of the exercises will be to, go see how we've known. Let's just use mother as the example. You're traveling into the past. There's a scene there you'll go into. Okay, what year is this? And you say, well, it's 1862. Okay, great. What was happening there? they can describe that scene. And then there's a recognition, maybe not as much of of course, yes, it's maybe a foreign country. It's an interesting place, but the more important part is like what's happening there, like what's happening in the relationship. How is the relationship there? And then can we go ahead and notice there may be parallels between the relationship that we were having back then and the one we're having now? And again, as I mentioned earlier, we can recognize there's good in everything. We have a lot to be thankful for. So let's look at that. And yet, if there's places that need improvement, let's also look at that as well. Blessings, learnings, what did we come to learn together? And then bring that new knowledge and awareness into the here and now so that when we come back, then we can address that parent or that whoever, that loved one, that sibling, that coworker, whoever it is, it could be anybody. We can address them then from this different perspective because we've gone inside and done what I would call, we've healed the part of ourselves that's someone else. So any internal projection that we might be having on someone or things that we couldn't get over, maybe we've come in our own mind and our soul at this spiritual dimension to a different understanding of something that was very troubling. And so we're just kind of letting it go now. And so then when we show up to that other person, our whole energy, our vibes, they've totally changed. We've let it go. And then we can just start moving forward with this new, more peaceful understanding of reality.
And you also devote a chapter to reimagining and rewriting our ancestral history and past lives. Please share an example of this practice.
There's been so many people I've worked with that have had just difficult things go on with family. They may have been adopted. They may have been growing up in foster care and things like that. Maybe having, like I said, a wide range of challenges with parents that makes this forgiveness journey that we discussed earlier very, very difficult. So one thing we can do, some people have never met their family. They've never met their birth parents or they've got a difficult relationship with parents or people who have raised them or whatever you want to say. And so sometimes the things that have happened to us in the past, we have a story about what happened there. And then that story starts to carry forward into our here and now and into the future. And it's informing how the future can show up for us. And so an exercise would be, let's say we wanted to go into the past to an event that was very hurtful, and we could just, rather than thinking about how it actually went down and happened, we could rewrite, well, what if I had never heard that hurtful statement? Or what if this and that hadn't actually happened? Let's go ahead and write that out and think about how that would feel, how that would go if I was experiencing a totally different reality, and then start to just release the stuck energy around the painful thing from the past and just move forward as if things had worked out differently, and just projecting that ideal image out into the future, into what we want to create. I get into the book about, like, if anyone's a science fiction fan, which I kind of like science fiction myself, but they always have that paradox, like, if I go back and kill my grandfather, then I'll never be born. And so I cited an article in there where they actually found that's really not true because of the nature of quantum physics. So people might be saying, well, I can't go rewrite my history and move forward from here because then nobody who I know would even be alive and all that. But again, just call it the realm of the imagination, just using your imaginative power to make the world the way you want it to be, and then to move forward for the rest of today and tomorrow and into the future, taking one step at a time, one moment at a time, just acting as if this world was exactly the way you want it to be, and believing that these things are possible. It can really create miracles in life.
My guest is Shelley Kaehr. Her new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. We'll be back with more after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Shelley Kaehr. Her new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. Shelley, what is muscle testing and how is this used in ancestral healing?
Yes. So muscle testing is where you're crafting statements and then you're starting to notice that there is strength in things that are true and weakness in things that are false. And I think truth is very subjective. So I know a lot of your listeners out here know a lot about doing different applied kinesiology and using pendulums and muscle testing, but basically we can craft statements. So I have like an exercise where if I need to get some guidance on something, I would craft a statement. It's okay to ask these questions. I'll get a yes or a no. In this, I always like to say, in my current life, my given name is Shelley Kaehr. I like to quantify my current lifetime. And then obviously I'm going to get a yes, and then I'll craft another statement. My name is Mark. No. And then I'll get a no. And so and then when you're testing this, there's different ways I go through in the book where I like to hold my arm out and I'm using an object. That's my favorite way. In the book, I'm guiding readers through different ways you can do it, but I usually use a heavy object. So when I'm saying something truthful, an object, no matter how heavy it is light as a feather. And when I'm saying something like I'm not stating my own name, for example, then the object is so heavy I cannot lift it even a millimeter off of a desk. And so through this, you begin to get into rapport with the wisdom that is inherent within the spirit and the soul. And so through that, then you can use that to identify spaces in the body that need healing. And in this context of this book, we're learning these muscle testing and applied kinesiology processes so that we can start to identify the places in the body that are specifically relating to either your father's side of the family or your mother's side of the family. And then from there, we do specific exercises to send healing and light to those areas once they are duly identified.
Some of us are familiar with the term cord cutting. How is this defined and applied in this work?
Yes. On our last segment, I was talking about my first book that I wrote on Huna and this Ho'oponopono, this cord cutting, healing, forgiveness exercise. So in a lot of the work, because of that early influence I had from that study and from writing that book, I started getting into this mindset that one way to I think a lot of spiritual practice is getting in our minds, using our imaginations to begin creating circumstances that are more favorable for ourselves. So if we're feeling challenged in any way, we can use the inner mind and the imagination to imagine that there's an energetic cord that is emanating from us. And in this case, it's connecting us with the soul essence or higher self of mother, the soul essence or higher self of father, and all the ancestors on either side of the family. And so we can begin to notice that connection. We can cut cords. We can send light into these connections and brighten things up a bit. And so it can be very powerful in, again, just reframing the way we're viewing reality. And it can also be very, very energizing.
How may the recognition of ancestral healing be applied to actual illness?
Well, the thing is, in that strange space that I was in when I had my mystery illness, the book kind of steps you through first of all, acknowledging how muscle testing and applied kinesiology works. Then we're going to use that to start identifying different sides of the body and different places within the body where, let's say, the maternal line or the paternal father's line is actually embodied in ourselves. And so then you can start thinking about, we all, I would think, have different weird aches and pains. Maybe they just rise up out of nowhere sometimes. We don't know where they're coming from. Some may be from actual, like maybe we did high school sports and now we've injured ourselves. I mean, and any other, maybe we were in a car accident. I mean, anything could have happened. And we could sometimes explain that some of these things were happening because of things that happened to us in our current life. However, there are some little twitchy things that, and I could say only for myself, that I have that I go, wow, I wonder where that came from. And then when I started seeing this information, I started realizing that some of these things are not actually about me, and they're not actually about my past lives. They are relating to my ancestors. And so if I can just send light into those areas, then that can alleviate it. And so as readers become more conscious about that, I think there's a natural inclination that if something hurts or if something is unpleasant, and of course I've done this, you want it to go away, you want it to stop, you want to take a pill, you want to run away, I need to go take a Tylenol right now or whatever, and you don't really stop to think, wait a minute, what if I would just sit here and be with that and send light into it? Then there's actually a shift and a change that can come. I had gone to a Vipassana course back in 2019 where I was locked in a center for 10 days in silence, meditating. And we had to be silent. And of course, none of my relatives thought I could keep this big mouth shut for that long. But guess what? I did. Thank you. During that time in that silence, I started also there experiencing a lot of discomfort in the body. And the instruction was just sit there and just be with it. Just don't try to move. Don't try to run away. Just try to be with it. And I think that teaching kind of led me to the ability to understand that some of the things that I probably would have attributed, as I mentioned earlier, to maybe my own past lives, when I had that illness in 2021, I started saying, wait a minute, some of that stuff I think is more due to my ancestors. And yes, I don't want to feel pain. Nobody does. We want to be in comfort, but all of us have, whether it's spiritual, emotional pain or physical pain, we all have pain. Everybody does. That's it's just part of life. And we want to try to obviously make our lives as pleasant as we can make them. And I think there's a natural inclination, again, to want to push that stuff away, make it go away. I'm just going to turn away. I don't want to look at that. I just want to ignore it. It's going to go away. But in this, we're really inviting ourselves, maybe before there's an actual pain that needs to be addressed, right? Just to go inside to some of these spaces, find out where they are. Maybe they don't hurt. Maybe they're just there. But can we just send love into those areas so that we don't, again, have to go through some of those more unpleasant aspects of life that we all go through?
And may these techniques prevent the transfer and heal future generations.
I guess maybe we'll be back by then to see how this is going to play out. But I have to believe, just based on my own understanding, and I know your listeners share a lot of these kinds of thoughts, that, we understand that there is really no such thing as time because of the multiverse and the way the quantum field works. I have to believe that when we can create more light and space within our own bodies by engaging in grace to those in the past, that more peaceful us can then send our light out to the future. And in these exercises, we actually do make a conscious effort then to, can we see those people yet? No. Can we go into our mind's eye though? And can we really encounter their spiritual essence of those people who are going to be here after we're on to our next life? Yes, we can, and we can send them light. We can send them peace and love and hope and those things. And I am one who does believe that it makes a difference.
Absolutely. What would you like readers to take away from ancestral energy healing?
I'd like people to, again, just engage with the processes in a gentle, loving way, just to open up to the idea that the ancestors are important, that it's important to acknowledge the past in order to heal the present and the future. And I hope that it'll just bring some awareness to people. If you're feeling discomfort today, just to send love and grace to yourself and consider that potentially, if we could extend that love and grace into the past to the ancestors, that it may indeed help in the here and now.
The wisdom of my guest, Shelley Kaehr, her brand new book, Ancestral Energy Healing, a guidebook. Shelley, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you.
Yes, my website is pastlifelady.com. I have a book link there, and you can see me on Facebook at Past Life Lady.
Shelley, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this wonderful information.
Victor, it's been such a joy to be with you today. Thank you so much, and many, many blessings to you, my friend.
Thank you, and to you. And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.